July 18th, 1944. Saint-Lô, Normandy. The hedgerows smell of elder and rotting flesh, a sweetness gone wrong in the summer heat. In a sunken road barely wider than a farm cart, a German machine gun crew crouches beneath a canopy of ancient oak branches, woven so thick they form a tunnel of green shadow. The Obergefreiter commanding the position has fought in Russia, survived Stalingrad's frozen hell, and learned to read a battlefield by sound alone. The whine of Katyusha rockets, the growl of T-34 engines, the peculiar crack of Soviet mortars. But the sound approaching now is different. It builds like distant thunder, growing from a hum to a roar. And when he risks a glance upward through the lattice of leaves, he sees them. A formation of fighter-bombers dropping from the sky in a sequence so precise it resembles choreography. So numerous they blot out the sun. He has 5 seconds to understand that the rules of infantry combat have changed. Then the hedgerow erupts in flame, and the earth becomes a mechanism designed to kill him. This was not air support as warfare had previously understood it. This was the sky transformed into artillery, a fluid battlefield dimension that responded to ground requests with the speed and precision of a telephone call. By the summer of 1944, American forces in France had perfected a system of close air support so overwhelming in scale and efficiency that it functioned as a fourth combat arm. Infantry, armor, artillery, and now the fighter bombers that could place 500-pound bombs within 50 meters of friendly positions, could strafe German strongpoints with such accuracy that American troops learned to mark targets with colored smoke and then wait minutes, not hours, for aircraft to arrive and obliterate them. The German Wehrmacht, which had pioneered combined arms warfare with its Blitzkrieg doctrine, found itself on the receiving end of a coordination system that made their own tactical air support look like amateur improvisation. The numbers were staggering in their industrial brutality. During Operation Cobra, the breakout from Normandy in late July 1944, American forces employed over 1,500 heavy bombers, 380 medium bombers, and 550 fighter bombers in direct support of ground operations. In a single day, July 25th, they dropped nearly 4,000 tons of high explosive and napalm on a rectangular target area 5 miles wide and 1 mile deep, saturating German positions so thoroughly that entire infantry companies simply ceased to exist. Survivors described not a battle, but a geological event, an earthquake of fire that buried men alive, turned tanks into scrap metal, and left the landscape resembling photographs of the moon. German commanders, attempting to rally shattered units, discovered that whole battalions had been reduced to wandering groups of shell-shocked men who could no longer process verbal orders, whose nervous systems had been rewired by sustained bombardment into something that could only flee or freeze.
German infantry had expected American tactical doctrine to follow European patterns, air support as a strategic tool used to attack rear areas, supply lines, command posts. They understood that air superiority mattered, that the Luftwaffe's collapse had ceded the skies to Allied aircraft, but they had assumed this meant harassment, interdiction, the disruption of supplies and communications. They had not anticipated that American doctrine would place fighter bombers in direct, intimate contact with frontline infantry units, that platoon commanders would carry radio sets capable of reaching aircraft orbiting overhead, that a lieutenant pinned down by a machine gun could speak to a pilot and watch that machine gun position disappear under rocket fire within minutes. The Wehrmacht had tactical air support procedures, but they were bureaucratic, slow, filtered through multiple layers of command. American close air support was democratic, distributed downward to the smallest units, designed around the principle that the soldier in contact with the enemy should have immediate access to overwhelming firepower from every available dimension. The system depended on innovations that were organizational as much as technological. Fighter bomber pilots flew cab-rent patrols, aircraft stacked in holding patterns above the battlefield, waiting for ground controllers to direct them to targets like taxis waiting for fares. Forward air controllers, often pilots themselves, embedded with advancing infantry units and spoke the same language as the men in the cockpits overhead, translating ground perspectives into aerial coordinates with practiced efficiency. Radio communication had been refined to the point where a complete fire mission, request, confirmation, and execution could occur in under 10 minutes. The Germans, monitoring American radio frequencies, were stunned by the casual professionalism of these exchanges, the ease with which a ground officer might say, "Enemy armor at grid 457-823, and receive the reply, "Roger, Thunderbolts inbound, 30 seconds, as if ordering pizza rather than orchestrating death from above. The psychological impact on German infantry was catastrophic and cumulative. In Russia, they had learned to dig deep, to create layered defenses that could absorb and channel Soviet attacks, but you could not dig deep enough to escape a bomb falling at terminal velocity. Fortifications that would stop a tank became death traps when fighter bombers arrived, concentrating explosive force on fixed positions with mechanical indifference. German soldiers developed a kind of aerial paranoia, flinching at every engine sound, abandoning defensive positions that should have been advantageous because holding them meant dying from above. After-action reports from captured officers reveal a consistent theme: the impossibility of maneuver, the sense that any movement drew instant attention from aircraft that seemed to be everywhere simultaneously, that the Americans had somehow achieved the ability to see everything and strike anything at will.
The symbolic object that haunted German accounts was not a specific weapon, but the colored smoke grenade, small canisters carried by American infantry that produce plumes of bright red, yellow, or purple smoke to mark targets or friendly positions. German soldiers learned to fear these innocuous-looking objects more than grenades or mortars, because smoke meant aircraft were coming, and aircraft meant the world was about to transform into fire. Capture diaries describe the ritual. American troops would throw smoke, then pull back, and within minutes, the marked area would vanish under bombs and rockets and napalm that burned so hot it consumed oxygen and left men suffocated in their foxholes even when the flames didn't reach them. The smoke became a death sentence, delivered in cheerful primary colors, a promise that American abundance extended even to the ability to summon fire from heaven on demand. The material cost of this system was extraordinary. Each fighter-bomber sortie consumed fuel, ammunition, ordnance, maintenance hours, all multiplied by thousands of missions flown daily. But America had designed its war economy around precisely this kind of consumption, had built the industrial base to treat aircraft and bombs as renewable resources. German logistics officers calculated that the Americans were expending more ordnance and close air support for a single division's daily operations than the Wehrmacht allocated to an entire corps for a month. The math made no sense within German frameworks of military efficiency, which emphasized economy of force and careful husbanding of limited resources. The Americans had rejected those constraints entirely, had decided that if close air support saved American lives and won battles faster, then the cost was irrelevant, because the factories could simply build more, the supply lines could deliver more, the sky could hold more aircraft than any enemy could possibly shoot down. By August 1944, German infantry units in France operated under the assumption that daylight movement was suicide. They retreated at night, hid during the day, and still the fighter bombers found them. P-47 Thunderbolts and P-51 Mustangs equipped with rockets and bombs, hunting columns and convoys with the persistence of predators who knew their prey had nowhere to hide. The Falaise Pocket, where retreating German forces were trapped and subjected to sustained air attack, became a killing ground so apocalyptic that even Allied soldiers who entered afterward were sickened by the scale of destruction. Thousands of vehicles destroyed, horses and men burned together, and masses that had to be bulldozed off the roads. The entire material apparatus of an army reduced to smoking wreckage visible from miles away. When Germany's Western Front collapsed in late summer 1944, military historians would point to many factors: logistics, manpower, strategic overreach. But the German infantry who survived knew a simpler truth. They had been driven from France by an enemy who owned the sky so completely that ground combat had become asymmetrical to the point of absurdity. The Wehrmacht had built its doctrine around maneuver and concentration of force. The Americans had built theirs around the ability to call down thunder, to turn the sky into an extension of the infantry's will, to make every hedgerow and crossroad and village square a potential killing ground that could be activated with a radio call and a colored smoke grenade. In that sunken road outside St.-Lo, the Obergefreiter survived the first strike because the bomb landed 3 meters to his left and the blast wave passed over rather than through his position. He crawled from the crater, deafened and bleeding, and abandoned his machine gun because staying meant dying. He retreated with what remained of his company, moving only at night, sleeping in cellars and caves, and never again trusted the sky or the earth or his own ability to predict where death would come from. Years later, in the gray reconstruction of post-war Germany, he would tell his children that the Russians had been terrible but comprehensible, an enemy you could see and fight and sometimes defeat. The Americans had been something else, an enemy who fought from dimensions you could not reach, who possessed abundance so vast they could afford to turn the sky itself into a weapon, who had answered the problem of the hedgerows not with better tactics, but with the simple, overwhelming solution of burning everything from above until there was nothing left to defend and nowhere left to hide.